Good morning. Welcome to our service here in the great state of Fort Valley, the most beautiful place in all the world. I am outside doing our morning service, and what I wish I could do for all of you that are listening all over, I wish I could spin around and show you the beautiful mountains that are right to my side. So I want to welcome you here. And I pastor two United Methodist churches here in Fort Valley, Whitechapel, and I also pastor Oak Level for those of you that are listening by YouTube. Let me start out with a little song that I'm sure most of you will remember. Several years ago, there was a songwriter by the name of Bob McFarlane. And he, through his struggle with depression for most of his life, in fact, it was during that one of those periods of severe depression that many thought that Bob had taken his own life. That wasn't true, but because he withdrew so much into his struggle that people started writing that he must have passed away. Bob did not pass away by suicide. In fact, he died of a simple myocardial infarction, a heart attack, and that took his life, I believe, at the age of 70. But he wrote this song, and as I quoted, I'm sure most of you will be able to sing with it. It simply goes like, here's a little song that I wrote. You might want to sing it note for note. Don't worry. Be happy. Come on, you guys can sing that part of it. Be happy. In every life we have trouble, but when you worry, it makes it double. So don't worry. Be happy. You ain't got no place to lay your head. Someone came and took your bed. Don't worry. Be happy. The landlord says your rent is late. He may even have to litigate. Don't worry. Come on, be happy. You guys are pretty good at this, and all of you that are listening, I'm expecting to hear from each one of you about that. You ain't got no cash and ain't got no style. You ain't even got a girl to make you smile. Don't worry. Just be happy. When he wrote that song, he was basically talking about his own struggles that he was going through. It's easy. I think sometimes it's amazing to me as I think about that sometimes in the despair of our own despondency that we are encouraged to be able to even write that little song like that. I want to start a series of messages for those of you, and I'll explain to you in detail as we go along. From those of you that are listening on Facebook and by YouTube, and then of course as we meet on a regular basis or trying to re-meet on a regular basis, I want to start a series of messages called Winning the War on Worry. Winning the War on Worry. I think that no more pertinent issue can be talked about or spoken today than the issue of worry. And more than that, how do we conquer the issues that seem to be plaguing our mind? So I'm going to be there for the next month as we look at the issue and try to define from scriptural the issue of how do we take the issues that seem to be plaguing each one of us and to answer the question, God, what would you want us to do to be able to answer those questions? Now, let me start out by saying a couple things. I think we call these house rules. Everyone, if you've ever been to a meeting, then there'll always be someone, a leader, that will say, and here's how this meeting is going to go. So I want to do that this morning. I hope that going on from here, those of you that are listening or those that may be here, that you'll grab a notebook and be able to at least jot down some ideas that may be able to help you going on. The first thing I want to do is to simply say this, and I want everyone to listen, and that is this. This morning's message really isn't the message at all. It is simply the introduction and laying the foundation of where we're going to be going. We're going to look at the issue of worry and ask the question, is it possible to conquer the things that lay on our mind in a very heavy way? I've done a lot of study getting ready for this time that we would be together, and I do want to say that I've read a lot of articles from a lot of people who feel that worry is a normal part of life and that true development really isn't overcoming worry at all. It's accepting the facts that it brings. Now, that's really the big question, and that is this. Can a person, and especially a Christian, find themselves applying biblical principles and answering the solutions that no doubt plague each and every person. So number one, I want you to say it with me. This is the foundation. That's all you're going to get this morning is the introduction to where we're going to be going. Now, I promise you it'll be worth your time. The second thing I want to say about this series of sermons, and that is this. Pay close attention to what I'm about to say. That 99% of what I will say during this next month is things that we already know. In fact, I've been pastoring now for 41 years, and I was sitting in my office this morning and I said to myself, it's ironic, but really, most of us heard the things that we already should know. Isn't that true of everyone? I'm not trying to pick on anyone, but it's true of all of us. If you've been in church as long as I have, or some of you even longer, then in one way or the other, you've heard all the sermons that you've heard. Now, it may be a twist on it, or there may be an ideal or as I was teasing Sandy about, there may be some kind of way that you deliver it. Some people deliver it with hellfire and damnation, and some do it with an educational background. But basically, really, honestly, all of us know, if we've been in church very long, the basic things that we need to do. So here's what I want to encourage us as I speak to myself, and that is this. What we really need to do this time around, because it's important, is that we need to somehow plug in to be able to remind ourselves on a regular basis of the things that we have to do. We have to bring those ideas together. Instead of leaving a sermon here, and then a year later hearing another sermon, and 5 years another sermon, and then at one point when you go through something like worry, then bringing them all together is much, much difficult. Here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want you to buy a notebook or something, and then I want you to put this all together so that when worry starts coming to you, that you're able to open that notebook and look at the scriptures and then be able to make a decision. The third house rule I want to say, I've never said this in my life that I can remember, and I want to say it this morning. I promise you, no put on, no makeup, no excitement is making me say this. I simply want to guarantee every single person listening and in this room right now, I promise you a change in your life. I promise you a change in your life. If you stay with me during this series that we're about to unfold, then you'll find yourself, if you apply the things that you're going to hear, which is not going to be some great, wonderful thing. It's going to be practical, biblical principles that you can take home and apply. I remember several years ago, it was right after I started pastoring. I moved here and was filling it and pastoring. I was at Lowe's buying something. I don't remember what it was, but I was out back. I was out front and I was loading everything on the back of my pickup when all of a sudden I had what I thought was a massive heart attack. Now, let me tell you something. If you've ever had anything like that, even if it's angina, the moment that struck me, it caught my attention. I was loading everything, thinking about what I wanted to do and what I was going to accomplish, whatever I was loading. And then all of a sudden, I remember breaking into this immense sweat, and my whole entire body went numb. And I turned to Carol and I said, honey, stop. I'm having a massive heart attack. And she rushed me over to the hospital at where I live currently. And all of a sudden, they rushed me into ED. And I remember the doctor at that time, the ER doctor on call. She walked in there after they did the EKG and all the blood work up. And she looked at me and she said these words, "Sir, you have suffered a heart attack. You have suffered a heart attack." Now, when the moment she said that, you might as well blown up the whole world. I couldn't think or hear of anything else that was being said. At that moment, I tell you honestly, my mind was filled with worry. What was I going to do at that time? And a lot of things I won't want to go into, but later on. But at that moment, all I could think about, I'm going to die. Why? I'm still a young man, right? And so at that moment, I remember laying in that bed, and they took me from the ER up to a room, and as I laid there in the bed, so many things went through my mind. Let me share a couple with you about this. I remember thinking to myself, I just started pastoring. what am I going to do? And I kept thinking to myself, no, they're not going to keep me. I mean, I've only been here maybe a week or two, and now I'm in the hospital. And I told Carol, now we're in fine shape. I thought to myself, maybe I should just check myself out and at least die trying to preach. And no, that wasn't a good idea. And man, I mean, one after another, I remember thinking, and then I thought, well, I'm going to leave Carol a young bride, and oh, it won't be hard for her to remarry. And that started going through my mind. And then I remember distinctly thinking, you know, how like everyone, I started thinking about the medical bills. I didn't have insurance at that time. And I remember thinking to myself, how was I going to pay this bill? And I started thinking to myself, I better check myself out. Because no doubt, I don't know what the hospital bed was going to cost, but I knew at that moment, my mind was full of worry. At that moment, I found myself almost dipping into this cesspool of worry. How was I going to make it? What was going to happen? Was I going to die? Now, I do want to give you the end of that because I'm notorious for not giving the end of stories. Amen. Don't say a word. And those of you that are listening, don't you write to me. I'll have to write something bad back. So let me tell you what happened. So laying there that night, the doctor came in and she put a nitroglycerin patch on my chest. And if you've ever had one, not under your tongue, but the patch, it started giving me a severe headache. And I was sick that whole night. And I kept telling one of the ER doctor, I said, take that patch from off my chest and put it on my ankle or my calf. If you know anything about cardiology, you know that if you do that, it'll take away the headache. And she said, oh, I've never heard of that. And I had to be her doctor, you know, but she never did listen. So that night, I remember, now I was sick all night, and it gives you this nauseating. You can't throw up because you're just at that point of, ooh, and I'm worried and I'm sick and I don't know what to do. And all that night, I just turned and tossed and never got sleep. And every 30 seconds they came in to draw blood. And I kept thinking to myself, this has to end. I'm in a nightmare. The next morning the sun came up and I remember cresting into the hospital room and one of the cardiologists walked in. Not the ER doctor, the cardiologist. He looked at everything and said, I'm not for sure why she even gave you nitroglycerin. You don't need to be in the hospital. You've not suffered a heart attack. All of a sudden, I saw the sun come up in two ways. I saw that all of a sudden, all the worries that I was going through maybe wasn't as severe as I thought. And that really is where we all have to start. Some worries are very serious, and I can't stand up here and act like they don't exist, because they do. And it wouldn't be fair to you or to me to stand up here and try to imply that you can just flip a wrist and turn it on or turn it off. In fact, some of the worries are so deep inside that honestly, they really can become so paramount. Now, I told you this was the foundation. So all you're getting is, and I hope you don't get numbed out by just the introduction. Let me tell you where this whole series was birthed. It was birthed out of this thing right here. Sandy had encouraged me to start the Facebook. I didn't want to do it. I've got 12,000 things. And if you've been listening to me, you know I'm building a brand new office in my home. I thought, oh no, I don't want to do that. And I felt, the more I thought about it, I feel like my job is ministry. And I said to myself, I said to Carol, I don't mean this in a negative way, but heck with that basement, heck with that office. People, I need to do what I'm called to do. Now, I had no idea. I was developing a series of sermons, and if you've been listening to Bright Spot, then you know they've been coming out of the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. And what I did is through those series of messages, I've been asking the question, how to rebuild people's lives, how to help a son-in-law or granddaughter, a daughter that's gone wayward. How do you help them rebuild their lives? But what I didn't know would happen is I did several sermons on the third principle that Ezra did. Ezra turned people back to God. He started building a church or a temple. And it wasn't just a church so that they can say, hey, there we go to church. That wasn't it. It was a serious place in the life of the Jewish people. The third thing I said to them that he built was an altar. And an altar was a place to be able to bring your worries and fear and frustration and dump them so that things don't get the better part of us. Now, when I did that, I have to tell you, I had no idea the response I would get out of that statement. I was flooded with calls, letters, and people writing back, asking the question, Pastor, is there any hope for the things that are filling my mind? I found out that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in my limited world was being filled with this thing called worry. Let me say it this way. My plan for the next month, I promise you, is to give you answers. People are filled, absolutely, in church and out of church, believers and unbelievers, Americans and people of foreign countries, on every social level, at every educational background, and at every social standing of jobs. We are filled with worry. I can't believe that a small ministry like this would blossom for people screaming, saying, please answer the question. Let me read to you this, and I think most of you that are listening and most of you that are tuning in will say, preach on, Pastor. We are filled with worry over this pandemic. Honestly, aren't we? Come on, let's not play that like we don't understand. Hey, what did I tell you guys to bring this morning? A cup of coffee. Oh, wait, I just saw there's excess. This is not an X-rated cup, by the way. I just now saw that. It's a cup Carol got me. It's a love cup. So I hope you don't mind that. But the pandemic, it's very real. Everyone knows that if every time you turn the news on, the number seems to be going up. 11,000 in our area, 12,000, 13,000. And I'm sure some of you that have been listening that are in New York, you probably are absolutely amazed. I know those of you that were listening in Texas and had been writing me, I've been praying for you. But it's a paramount where this pandemic is just, some people are paralyzed by it. I have to be honest, I'm a little amazed. I have friends of mine that are writing me now and they're not even leaving their house. One family wrote to me and said, Pastor, I have people now bringing in my lunch and I have them set it at the door. But I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone because simply I'm afraid that I'll get this pandemic. At the same time, I have to say, I know that many of you may say, Pastor, be gentle, and I'll try to be. And that is this, we have so much social unrest right now. So much social unrest. I mean, many of you, if you turn the news on, what do you see? Another burning, another bombing, another riot, another attack on our police officers. Black lives matter, white lives matter. I went by one house in Harrisonburg and I was amazed. On the front lawn of this house, it had a white sign, about this big by this big, and on it said, Black Lives Matter. But what was unique about that, I drove about another 2 or 3 foot and I looked and there was another sign and it said, Hispanic Lives Matter. And in the front, from one start of that person's house all the way, every 3 to 4 foot was another sign saying somebody else matters, somebody else matters, somebody else matters. We are filled with worry, aren't we? If I can make a statement, and I hope you will understand, I'm not saying good or bad, but in Virginia, where I do live, we are at the highest rate of weapons sales in its entire history. We are now selling more guns. And in fact, I have a friend of mine who collects guns. And he said to me on Thursday, he said, now the worry and fear is so high, you can't get ammunition for the gun that you now own. We are absolutely filled with fear from wondering what's going to happen. Is it going to ever move here? Is it going to be in your area? And so we are constantly, every day, we turn the news. I now, every morning when I would get up, I would listen to the news, and we have a wake-up area in our bedroom. And Carol would get up, and while I was showering and shaving and getting on my beautiful self, right, I would be listening to the news. But then I realized, I said to Carol, honey, please, I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. I can't take it anymore. I don't want to hear another news. I don't want to hear Fox. I don't want to hear CNN. I don't want to hear CBD or GBG or whoever's got the news. I'm tired. I can't take it no more. And I said, please, honey, don't listen. Don't play the news. She said, what do you want me to play? I said, start playing love songs. She wanted to make sure that wasn't a hint of nothing, you know. And don't write to me, you guys. But now every morning while I'm shaving and that, she turns on love songs. And I love it because all of a sudden I'm not bothered. Now, please, I want to beg you to tell you this. Man, we are being bombarded. And this bombardment is taking its toll on each one of us. And beside that, then I have to admit to you, then we're seeing something happen morally in our country. There's something happening. Something's wrong. I can't put my finger on it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not spiritual enough. But I can tell you this. I'm seeing an immense decay in our society. Statements and ideas and pulling over and hurting and cheating and absolutely we're killing infants and there's something wrong. It's like we're so mad at God. I think maybe Psalms is right and it says, why are people so mad at God? Why do the heathen keep imagining a vain thing? There's something wrong. Now let me just say with all of that I wish that alone, those three things, but really the issue along with those three major things, then we each have our own life, don't we? Those of you that are listening, I'm sure you could write in and tell me all of the things that are going on in your life. And I do want to say, from my heart to yours, thank you so much. I've been praying for many of you that have sent me statements that you want. I know that some of you have lost a daughter. My heart has been broken by your comments. Some of you that have wrote to me about your financial bankruptcy. I can't tell you how much that has weighed on my life and for you. And we here at Whitechapel and Oak Level are going to be taking your needs so serious. But it's everyone, aren't it really? Everyone has their own. Now you put those are facing all of us. But then we add on our physical condition, the things that our family are going through. All of a sudden, we wonder to a moment that like I was standing with a couple men the other day on Wednesday. We were standing together and they went over this list. I didn't tell them, but the one man, he looked and he must have been in his 90s. And he said to the other man, he says, man, look at what's happening to this country. I quote him, and it's a little crazy, but he said, we're going to hell in a handbasket. I wanted to say, preach it, brother, but I didn't. One after another, these older gentlemen were standing there until one of them said this, and I want to lock in and I want to key on this. He said these words, I'm sure glad that I'm not having to raise children now. Oh, yeah. I'm sure glad. Now, I turned to those old men and I did something that I don't know if they'll ever speak to me again. And I said to them, don't ever, what time you live, let me hear you make that comment out of your mouth again. All of a sudden, they said, what do you mean? I said, because, well, you're saying that we have a generation who's trying to raise kids and they don't need to hear of your despondent attitude. It's time that you and I, even though it's struggle, come on, right? Nod your heads. You know it's true. But I'm saying if you make that comment, what about your great-grandchildren? You're basically saying to them, there's no hope. They are the hope. So encourage them instead of getting to this idea that we're all going to hell. There's no way to save us. Nothing's going to happen. Maybe that's not totally true. All right, let's get into this sermon now. We'll give you a couple things to think about. There is two things that you will face in your life if you're ever going to live a successful Christian life. There is two enemies that seem to, out of the dust of life, of living from day to day, two, I want to call them spirits that may be over dramatic, but two spirits from the enemy arise in every life. And here's one. One, you'll have to deal with, no doubt, the spirit of fear. The reason that I can feel confident in calling it the spirit of fear and not just fear, listen to 2 Timothy 1:7, that God has not given to us the spirit of fear. I assume then by that verse, fear is not just something normal, but it's abnormal and it's a spiritual attack on the lives of individual people. You and I, sooner or later, have to deal with the fears that come up. And by the way, I do want to say that the majority of the things that we're dealing with really, that we're worried about, have its avenue from the fear that we're facing. We don't know what's going to happen, right? There's a fear of locking our doors, getting a gun. We're afraid. And I'm not saying, I'm not against anything. I'm just saying those attitudes. The second thing that we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to talk about it for a month, and that is the issue of worry. What? Worry. You have two demons. I'm going to use that word. If that's too dramatic for you, then find something else to call it. But you'll deal with number one, fear. And I realized one thing as I was meditating on this sermon. Fear and worry can find itself attacking at every level. You think, well, I'm worried about finances because I have none. Let me say something to you. You can have a lot of money and still be worried that you don't lose it, right? Yeah. I have a friend of mine that's a banker, and he and I were talking the other day, and this last round of during this virus, he's lost over $1 million. And he said to me, I can't sleep. And I thought to myself, I think I faced that same thing when I was broke, didn't you guys? It's amazing, huh? Come on, you guys know what I'm talking about. You that are listening, you can have it all and you worry about losing it all. You can have nothing and be worried about having nothing. So let's define real quick for those that are listening and those that are here. How do we define then worry? And I have a lot on this issue. Number one, worry is the state of mind filled with uncertainties over actual or potential problems fueled by fear. I want to say that again. 99% of the time that fear or worry is used in the scripture, it is accompanied or fueled by fear. You see, why was I worried? I was worried because I couldn't pay the bill of the hospital. And by the way, I didn't tell you the rest of that story, did I? Even after, don't agree with me.
Yeah, no.
What did happen at the end of that, I left, I incurred a $12,000 medical bill. And the day after I got the bill, somebody came along and wrote a check for $12,000. And if you say, Pastor, that doesn't happen, I have a copy on my phone, and I'd be glad to show it to you guys afterward. Somebody sent me a copy. It happened to them. They received a $16,046 bill. And they did the same thing that we were talking about. And I've got the letter. He sent it to me and said, Pastor John, I just want you to know somebody paid my bill in full. $16,046. And he wanted me to see the medical bill where it was taken care of. I'm simply saying, what is fear? Fear is the state of mind filled with the uncertainties over the actual and potential problems fueled by your own fears. Secondly, it is the persistent mental nagging, demanding our attention, even if there's nothing we can do. Isn't that so true? I don't know about you. I had somebody say to me the other day, they said, I'm really worried. I said, what are you worried about? They said, I don't know. I just worried because I ain't got nothing to worry about. And I thought to myself, that's funny. You're worried because you got nothing to worry about. But worry really is the persistent nagging and the demands our attention to sometimes, in fact, many times. Really, if you could change it, you'd change it, right? Come on, right? I mean, if you're worried about a bill, if you could just reach out in the bank and get the money and pay the bill, you would. It's funny is that worry demands you to do something you ain't got a clue how to do. You're not even capable of doing it. If the doctors say you're going to be this, how are you going to change? You can keep yourself better. You can take the medicine. You can go get the treatment. But the ultimate issue is you'll do as much as you can, and then you're limited. Let me give you another one. It is the mental distress or aggravation resulting from concerns of something pending or you're anticipating. It is something that weighs on your mind. Maybe this will happen. And worry, I tell you, opens the door to everything else. I do want to say this. I remember years ago, I heard a sermon on worry. And I'll never forget this sermon. It was from the book of Job, of all places. And it said these words, and I want you to hear it, because it almost sent me to an early grave. The sermon went something like this. The sermon went something like this. And so that's fine. The sermon went something like this. There's something, just watch from the background of this. So what happened, this person preached from Job. The verse of scripture went something like this. The things that I most feared have come upon me. That was the verse that he talked about. And he said this, if you worry and fear enough, it's going to happen no matter what it is. Well, guess what? I really started worrying then. I started saying to myself, oh my God, I really do have to stop this worry. If I worry about the finance, I'm going to be broke. And then all of a sudden I thought, I'm in a worse shape. He should have never preached that sermon to me. The issue really comes down to this. It's what are we to do? Because here's what worry is. And I think the best example of worry as I close is found in Matthew. And I want you to put it in your thoughts. Matthew gives the best example of what worry is, but he does it in a different way. The scripture says in Matthew 26, verse 58, when Jesus had when Jesus had been beaten, and the scripture says that Peter kind of slithered in like a snake. He sat down where no one could see him. And then all of a sudden, he's taking everything in. He's watching Jesus get beaten. He's watching the disciples leave. He's watching the arguments. He's looking at everything. And the verse simply says this. Now follow closely. Matthew 26:58 says, but Peter followed him afar off unto the high priest's palace. And they went in. And he sat with the servants to see the end. To see the end. I typed into my computer the word end. E-N-D. That statement caught my attention. To see the end. I found out a weird word there. The Greek word for the word end there is tetelos. That didn't impress me. Then I typed in a research for that word and it said that's where we get the word telescope. To telos. Telescope. I said, oh. I started doing more research and found out that literally what it is the ability to look far away or in the distance to be able to make a decision now. It's like every now and then you'll hear somebody say, there's an asteroid going to hit the earth. What they're doing is they're looking into the future, the distance, and asking us to make a decision right now. And I want you to listen to me. Fear is asking for you and I to look at a situation based on the knowledge that we have standing here and make a decision. The only problem with that is we don't know the end, right? You can surmise, you can think, you can pray, but the issue is none of us know the end. Only God knows the end. If you've never read a book, or Tom, the book reader, if I were you guys, buy this book. It's called Through the Gates of Splendor. Through the Gates of Splendor. It's by the late, great Jim Elliot, missionary to the Ecuadorian Indians. If you've never read a book, your life will be absolutely changed forever. Here's the story that unfolds. Jim was going to Wheaton College, the same time that Billy Graham and many of the greats that were living were going to college. Jim got the call to go to Ecuador to preach to this tribe of Indians that were cannibalistic in nature. So he gets the call. He goes to Ecuador. He's starting the inroads. And he and 4 other people, and I could mention Gary Chapman as he travels. He takes the Indian that did the murder and ate these 5 missionaries. He ate these 5 missionaries. Now he's a Christian and travels the world. But something amazing happened. During Jim and Elizabeth, his wife's trip to Ecuador, there was a time when Elizabeth got so sick, the doctor called Jim and said, I'm sorry, Jim. Your wife won't make it. By tomorrow, she will be dead. The story in the Gates of Splendor, and you'll read it, said that Jim went into the back and started weeping before the Lord, asking the question, Lord,